Now, for the most of this course, we've talked about capturing traffic sent over a wired Ethernet network. And that's all fine and good, as most of the networks we probably deal with on a daily basis, both in our business and home, probably are wired networks. But we can't ignore wireless. Wireless is out there. It's been out there for a few years, and it's becoming a more and more popular method of sending data both in the home and the business. So we can't really ignore that. We're just going to go over a quick overview of wireless traffic over the next few sessions. We'll look at some wireless captures and we'll talk about some of the issues problematic with sniffing and capturing wireless traffic. Now, just as a quick reminder, wireless networks, as you know, use air as a medium. So radio waves, infrared light, microwaves, and satellite signals are sent through the air, and they're all considered wireless technologies. For the purposes of our discussion, though, we're only going to look at the standard 802.11 family of wireless. That's the family of wireless that covers pretty much most home networks and small business to large business networks. Networks that don't really require satellites and microwaves to be used over long distance. These are the most common environments the 802.11 family is. Now, to point out some differences between wireless networks and wired networks, wireless networks are not restricted by physical barriers. With wired networks, of course, you have basically, in its simplest terms, a length of Ethernet cable separated by two switches or two hosts. And in order to sniff that network, you basically have to plug into a switch or get a host somehow plugged into that wired network. So you have to be in physical proximity to the network for one thing, and you have to have a physical connection. Well, in wireless networks, you don't have to have a physical connection because the air is your physical connection. It uses air as a medium. So you don't have the same restrictions in sniffing a wireless network, but you do have some restrictions out there. Distance is a major restriction. Wireless networks can only travel so far. The maximum distance of a typical wireless network might be a couple of 100 feet. And combine that with some obstacles such as buildings in the way or trees or whatever. Also, the weather might be a factor. It might be very difficult to sniff that network. Other factors such as transmitter power, how powerful the transmitter is that's sending the wireless signal, how good your receiver is, those are limitations of sniffing wireless traffic as well. So while you don't have some of the same physical barriers, you do have other barriers and other restrictions on capturing wireless traffic. Now, another important factor that we'll talk about affecting your ability to sniff wireless traffic, and that's encryption or the lack of it if a network doesn't have it. Now, as we talked about, wireless traffic is transmitted into the air, radio waves. So those radio waves can be captured by anyone. So anything that those radio waves carry, any data, is subject to anyone capturing and reading. Well, some wireless networks don't have encryption at all, and they do just that. They send out traffic unencrypted. Now, a wireless network that has no encryption is very easily sniffed. All it takes is a laptop or even a small PDA, and all you're doing basically is grabbing the radio waves out of the air, and everything is in plain text. That's why encryption was pretty much introduced into wireless networks, because since you're not afforded the same abilities, same physical restrictions as a wired network, there's got to be something protecting those signals. So encryption was introduced with the 802.11b standard and enacted so that traffic could be encrypted to guard against sniffing. In fact, you'll hear this across the board during your security career. Encryption is probably the single best defense against things like sniffing, man-in-the-middle attacks, and things of that nature. And encrypted protocols used with wireless are probably your best defense against someone sniffing a wireless network. Now, I do want to point out, however, that even encrypted traffic can be sniffed. It may not necessarily be decrypted, but it can be sniffed. You can capture it. Now, how would you go about capturing wireless traffic? Well, you're going to need some software, first of all, and there's a lot of software out there for sniffing and cracking wireless networks. There's things like NetStumbler, for example, and Wi-Fi FOFUM. NetStumbler is a very popular program used for Windows and on PDAs. So is Wi-Fi FOFUM, a particular program for PDAs. But there's also software out there that is used to sniff and analyze wireless traffic. Some popular ones, of course, are Wireshark, which we've already seen, a program called CommView Wi-Fi, which we'll see in a moment, and some other popular software. Kismet's probably one of the most popular ones out there. It's a little bit older, but it requires particular kinds of wireless cards. There's also things like AirCrack, AirSnort. There's dozens of programs out there, a lot of them open source and free. Now, which one of these you use depends on what platform you're using. Some of these are strictly Windows software, and some of these are pretty much strictly Linux. Now, which software you use also depends on your network card, your wireless network card. Network cards, especially wireless network cards, can be tricky with sniffers. In general, cards have to be put in what's called promiscuous mode to effectively sniff. Now, wireless cards are a little bit more difficult to deal with sniffing, so you have to get a piece of wireless software that supports the card. In Linux, that's a little bit difficult sometimes, but Linux is pretty much coming around now to where most wireless cards are supported. Whatever you use basically depends on your platform, and more importantly, it depends upon your expertise. A lot of these programs can do pretty much the same thing. It just depends on what you need them for and what you're good at and how well you know how to use the software.